That guitar work is the sound of Craig Straubinger, founder and frontman of the Trip Daddies, a band who had a huge following for many years in the Midwest. I caught up with Craig just 1 week before the Trip Daddies played their final show at the Duck Room in St. Louis, their hometown. You're listening to Frets with DJ Fey. No lessons, no technique info. I just talk to people who play guitar. Stay tuned. I find it interesting and very cool that your early heroes seem to be more in the realm of guys like Scotty Moore and Eddie Cochran, Hank Garland, and even Gene Vincent's guitar player, Cliff Gallup.
Yeah, that's from as far back as I have memories. When I was a child, dating myself in the 1970s, way back in the 1900s, it was not uncommon for our dads to listen to records if there was nothing on the television set, which had 4 channels. And Dad had broad taste. He was just generally a fan of pop music, but, I love the Ronettes and the Shangri-Las as much as I love, Eddie Cochran and Chuck Berry. But that music, I think it chose me, those early rock and roll records. I was certainly too young to analyze it, but it just got my goat. So much so that, we'd ride around in the car with our mom, and the radio would be on, and you'd hear Casey and the Sunshine Band or Captain and Tennille. I swear to you, at 7 years old, I was like, why are they not playing Gene Vincent records? Don't they know that these records exist? And from there, and by the time I was 11, 12, 13, it was a lot of Beatles, a lot of Stones, a lot of Led Zeppelin, and Black Sabbath came along, and on and on. I was just interested in just about anything with an electric guitar and some energy.
Yeah, my dad had a great record collection, and he primarily liked jazz, but even at a young age, I remember I was kind of fascinated by the album covers, and then Barney Kessel, he had some Barney Kessel, and I was just like, wow, this is really great stuff. So yeah, I think we're very fortunate that
Well, and that's the thing with like Cliff Gallup from Gene Vincent's band, or the guy who played the famous solo on Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley, a guy named Danny Cedrone. Again, I was too young to really think about it, but when you become a guitar player and you start listening to those guys, you realize there's a lot of jazz in there, and you wind up seeking out Charlie Christian and Hank Garland. Jazz Winds from a New Direction by Hank Garland. If you're curious, it's like peeling layers off an onion. You just keep going and going, and you realize along the way it's all connected.
Talk about when you first started playing in bands.
Well, I took lessons for not quite a year, 9 or 10 months or something like that, and I think after about a year, I got my first electric guitar. I was playing acoustic for about a year. And when I first started going to high school, a buddy of mine was playing electric guitar. And just to know a guy with an electric guitar was exciting. And he asked me if I wanted to come jam and with his band. And it was my buddy Chuck. And he stopped showing up for those rehearsals. So they asked me if I'd join the band. So about a year in, I was about 15 years old. I was in my first band.
I love hearing about where it all began for musicians. It's great. So in addition to playing shows, what bands and guitarists did you go see play live?
Who did I go see play live? Well, my first concert that I recall was at Six Flags, probably around 1978 or 79. It was the Beach Boys. And they brought Brian Wilson out. He weighed about 300 pounds, but it was Brian Wilson. I was like, look, there he is. I think even that, I love old Beach Boys records. I think the first concert that really just rocked my world was the Stray Cats in 1983. And I was already a super fan. But I got to see them at the Kiel Opera House. I guess I would have been about 12 years old. And I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to go back to school. I just wanted to live in that moment with the Stray Cats on stage and everybody wearing leather and the smell of cigarette smoke, hairspray, and leather. I was like, this is where I want to live. And you could say it corrupted me. And then, throughout the 80s, I was pretty darn into Jimmy Vaughan and Stevie Ray Vaughan. And they I remember hearing it on the radio. Stevie Ray Vaughan was special guest, the Fabulous Thunderbirds at the Fox Theater, and I had to pull the car over. I said, "You got to be kidding me!" And that is one of the greatest nights of music I think I've ever witnessed. And of course, I saw Stevie with Jeff Beck, and from there it just goes on and on. Then it just turns into a flood of memories. You name it, Chuck Berry, of course, and on and on and on.
Yeah, I saw, speaking of Six Flags Old Glory Amphitheater, I saw Chuck Berry play there once. And you'd mentioned Jimmy Vaughn. I knew of Jimmy Vaughn, and I went to see him before I even knew about Stevie Ray Vaughan. Then talk about showing your age. But I don't even remember the name of the venue, but it was a place I got on the Rock Road when the Thunderbirds were playing. And about the time I was... I don't even think I was subscribing, but I would go buy Guitar Player magazine, and there was an article about him. Wish I still had it, but it even had a black and white photograph of a young Jimmy Lee Vaughan with his kid brother, Stevie Ray Vaughan. And then, shortly after that, we all started hearing about Stevie Ray.
Well, yeah, that was all, Stevie hit it big when I was in high school, and me and a couple of guitar buddies would just sit around and try to debate who was cooler, Stevie Ray or Jimmy, and it could change. I could be swayed either way on any given day. Loved them both.
Yeah,
and that had a big impact on me.
It's a genuine thrill to see people you love playing on stage.
Yeah, and at that age, when you're a teenager, it hits you real hard.
So my musical tastes are so all over the place. I think it would be wrong though to assume that based on someone's style, that they're only interested in a certain genre. Is there a band or an artist you like that you think might surprise people?
It doesn't seem surprising to me. I have broad taste as well. So, I really love Devo. For some reason, a couple years ago, I sort of rediscovered those Gary Newman records that we all know, but I hadn't heard them in a long time. I'm like, God, those are great records. But that's a loaded question. I could go on and on. Again, and none of it sounds peculiar to me, but I guess, yeah, if you think you're talking to Mr. Guitar and I'm rattling off some synth bands, because I like a lot of rock and roll guys, I hated synthesizers when they first appeared. But when I heard Gary Newman and Devo, I realized, these, when used properly, these can be effective.
You might already know this, but I just discovered recently or read about it that, speaking of Gary Newman, that he played guitar and he got like a Gibson Les Paul when he was 15 years old. The other little bit of trivia I did not know was that he apparently auditioned for a spot as a guitarist with the Jam.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I'm a big Paul Weller fan, and I just recently read that, and I thought it was kind of interesting.
Huh. I know I've heard him talk about that guitar, Gary Newman, and he still has it. I didn't know he auditioned for the Jam. No.
That's the story. I believe that's right. But he obviously didn't get the gig.
So. Sometimes things work out for the better.
Yeah. I was just curious because it is interesting to me that, somebody, you don't want to I don't think typecast is the right word, but just kind of pigeonhole whatever the word is for somebody who plays a certain style of music. We all like all kinds of stuff. So, yeah.
I think musicians like music, but yes, people sometimes put you in a box,
Right.
1, 2, 3.
Looking to buy a guitar, an amp, pedals? Find great deals on all of these as well as audio and recording gear at reverb.com. You can also sell your gear through Reverb. They have great articles about music gear and bands. And Reverb believes music makes the world a better place. That's why they created Reverb Gives. that provides youth music education programs all over the world with the instruments they need to make music. Link to Reverb through Frets with DJ Fey in the show notes for this episode.
I always feel like such a hack when I see a lot of guys I know with their elaborate pedal boards. When I was a teenager, I had a pretty basic, cheap combination fuzz wah-wah pedal, and at one point I got myself a phase shifter. And I now only have one pedal, a used booster and distortion pedal, and I bought that like in the used department. I was really glad to learn, and I only learned this because you told me, that you really don't have this vast array of pedals. Talk about the equipment a little bit.
Should we start with pedals or
anything?
Because I'm really a guitar and amp guy. For pedals, that we can do that quick. What do I use now? An MXR carbon copy for the analog delay. Saving up to buy a full tone tape delay, like if you want to really do it, the full tone is sort of the modern equivalent of the Echoplex. But MXR carbon copy just for the rockabilly slapback. I've got one of those Boss yellow overdrive pedals. I can't remember if it's the SD one or 3 knobs on it. Just to do with that just a little bit. I use it sparsely, and every now and again I'll have some sort of vibrato or tremolo pedal in there. But for the moment, it's just that little. Occasionally the Boss and occasionally the Echo pedal, and I'm really into guitars and amps. And I think that's largely because I admire the guys that can get all sorts of sounds without, out of their fingers rather than pedals. I'm not anti-pedal for you pedal guys. I'm not judging, but I like guitars and amps. My favorite amp that I've owned, I have a 63 Fender Bassman. Found the receipt at my mom's recently. I purchased it in 1988 for $400, a white 63 Fender Bassman. Still my favorite one. When I was younger, I just threw caution to the wind and played it, no matter how small the room. But as I got older, I realized that I'm chasing people out of the room. And it's a loud amp. That's what I record with almost all the time. There's that one. For nowadays, playing out live, I've got I think it's a 2014 Supro. It's when they first started reissuing Supros, a dual tone. I like that a lot. And I've got a little Fender Pro Junior, which if you were to see it, you wouldn't think much of it. But when you plug it in, it sounds big. And so it's both of those amplifiers. There's no reverb, volume, and tone knob, and that's kind of how I like to roll. I like to plug into an amp, and I either like it or I don't. I don't like twiddling knobs all night. Simple.
I was always that way too. I just was kind of drawn to more the guitar and the amp.
Mm-hmm.
I never played enough. Or I guess more accurately, I never felt like I played good enough to warrant having a lot of guitars, and I could probably never afford to have, some of the ones I'd like to have in my collection. I do have 3. I got 2 Fenders and a Gibson, and I know you're a big fan of Gretsch guitars, which I think you mentioned.
Yeah, I saw Eddie Cochran in that movie, The Girl Can't Help It, and he had that big orange guitar, and I didn't know what I was looking at, but I know I loved Eddie Cochran, and then I noticed Dwayne Eddy had one, and when Brian Setzer turned up, he had one. I said, there must be something to it. So that piqued my interest. And 30 some odd years later, I'm still playing Gretsch guitars. There's different versions, of course, with single coil pickups. I like the Filtertron Humbucker. I like to say it's sort of like, my phone just made a noise. I like to say Gretsches are like that pair of jeans for me that look good with any pair of shoes and jacket. It's just my go-to. I feel comfortable on it. If I had all the money in the world, I'd have 2 of everything. I love Les Pauls, and I love those Gibson 350s or a 350T, the 335, and I love Fenders. I love the classics. I would have one of everything, but the Gretsch I don't think a lot of people think of those as all-purpose guitars, but I do. I feel like they're very versatile, and again, it just feels like that comfy coat or comfy blanket. And I feel like I know I convinced myself I know what I'm doing on them.
And my brother has a Gretsch Country Gentleman, and I love just holding that guitar and, of course, playing it. There's something about them. Yeah, mm-hmm. That's another one. Someday I'd love to have a Gretsch. Mm-hmm. You shared a stage with Slim Jim Phantom. Talk about that.
Slim Jim Phantom, the drummer man from the Stray Cats. He let's see, how did that go? He got asked to play the St. Louis Music Christmas party. St. Louis Music used to manufacture crate and Ampeg amplifiers, and also I used to work for Alvarez Guitars. Of St. Louis Music owned Alvarez. Anyway, Slim Jim got asked to play the Christmas party, which was actually a big to-do, and he was supposed to bring a band with him, and his band couldn't make it, and my buddy Steve Dockreeden, who was the artist relations man at the time, said, well, Jim, I'm just going to fly you out. I got a guy here. He knows all that stuff. He'll get a bass player, and it was me, of course. And I very nervously played a set in front of the whole company with Slim Jim Phantom, and we were off to the races. He asked me to play a handful of gigs with him, and very friendly guy. And for me, I mentioned the Stray Cats earlier, being on stage and looking over, and he still looks like Slim Jim Phantom. And I was just like, is this real? Is that really Slim Jim Phantom? And it was just a real unbelievable. It was like a thrill. And he was a nice guy. I still, chat with him every now and again, not terribly often, but that was a thrill.
Wow.
Yeah, I did a handful of shows with him.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Small man wears big shoes. Don't make him grow, just feels a little bit higher.
After playing with bands in garages and basements, Jimmy Griffin's group Broken Toys became a huge hit in the Midwest. Jimmy became a much sought-after player with a variety of tribute acts: Street Fighting Band, Celebration Day, El Monstero, and The Hard Promises.
I played with them a couple of years ago, and we were going through some of the songs, and Adam turned to me and he was like, man, this is real. And I was like, dude, your band made me I learned how to do that stuff via that band, and that was a really huge thing for me to play with those guys. It was fun.
Hope you'll give my talk with Jimmy Griffin a listen on Frets.
Hi, I'm Craig Straubinger, guitar man for the Trip Daddies. You're listening to Frets with DJ Fey.
Well, speaking of the Stray Cats, you met a guitar hero of yours, Brian Setzer. What was that like?
Okay, well, we opened for him twice, and I did not get to talk to him either of those times. But years before, he was playing out in Columbia, Missouri, and I met him out back behind the Blue Note. And I was still young. I was in my early 20s, I suppose, and I probably had a few too many beers. And I think I super fanned on him a little bit, fanboyed on him a little. That might just be my distorted memory, but he was very kind, and I would dare say patient. Nice guy. He signed an old import that I have, and it's just throwable. And opening for him was, opening. You can't get too far out of your head about that. You're just opening, but still, when you're opening for one of your heroes like that on the same stage, I was like, oh my God, we're doing this. It's a great thrill.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I always loved the Blue Note.
Oh yeah, I miss that place.
Yeah, you guys have played Mississippi Nights. You played some larger venues. I just personally, I think even still today, I really like small venues. They're just a little more intimate.
Oh, of course.
I remember, I should remember this. I think the first time I saw Trip Daddies was at Frederick's, and I missed that place too. But a mutual friend of ours asked me if I wanted to go to your show. This is back in the days when, we didn't have YouTube or anything. We didn't have, the only way I knew of you guys was that you were getting some play on local radio, KDHX, and I'm guessing it was like Greaser's Lunchbox, Al Swacker's show. Or...
Al played us a lot, and we got lucky with the KDHX supported us. And they're local, area musician's best friend, KDHX. Right.
So yeah, Fredericks was great. What was the name of the place? I saw you guys at a place on Broadway, I think called the Gearbox.
The Gearbox. Yeah. I think we played there 2 or 3 times, and like so many rock and roll clubs, it was there for a few months and then it was gone.
Right. Oh, if we could only bring Fredericks back.
I miss Fredericks. Fredericks was a unique St. Louis experience.
Yeah. So we'll inevitably get around to this, but how, if at all, did 2020 affect playing?
It stopped playing. I played on my couch. I think the last one we did was February 2020 at a place called the Bottle Works in Maplewood. And I had friends who were muscling it out and trying to, stay out there. Some guys, that's their only job. So they were just trying to keep money coming in. But I got as paranoid and frightened as anybody else and sat it out for a minute. And only just a couple months ago, I've started just getting my toes in the water, playing a gig here or there. It still feels like we're still in the hangover of it, But yeah, I'm we're playing again. I'll put it that way. But it was a time to, think too much. And I played guitar on the couch a lot.
Probably gave you more time to spend with your wife and your daughter.
Yes.
Personally, I'm glad you were taking it easy and taking it cautious. I don't think enough people were last year. So anyway,
Well,
that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I don't, because somebody's going to hear me talking about it. I'm like, oh, he's judging me. I saw, and it didn't look fun. I'd see videos of people playing and they're all separated in mass. I have a day job, so I'll just sit this one out.
Well, speaking of that, does your daughter play an instrument, or has she ever expressed any interest in playing anything?
She does for a little bit, and then she loses interest, and then she moves on to another thing. She has not committed to anything yet. She messes around with my guitars. We bought her a ukulele when she was really little.
Nice.
She likes to get behind. There's a drum kit at the house, so she likes to get behind the drums. I wouldn't say she's pursuing it quite seriously yet. She's great with karate. I think karate is her big thing right now. Like something I'm thoroughly impressed with, and she's committed to.
That's great. Yeah, the ukulele was the first instrument with frets that I ever picked up. It was actually, that was my mom's. It was a gift that my dad had given my mom when she was I think 16 years old. They were dating, so there's a whole story behind it. It's actually a pretty nice ukulele, and she still has it. So, What advice would Craig Straubinger give to an aspiring young guitarist?
What advice would I give to an aspiring young guitar? Practice. You got to play it over and over again, because that's how you get good. Be yourself and don't play over the singer. I'd give that advice to drummers and bass players too. Don't play over the singer. And be yourself. It's good to have heroes. And when you're young and trying to emulate them, you certainly build up your chops, but I was always conscious of not wanting to be the guy who sounds like that guy. Whether or not it served me well, that's debatable, but I always wanted to be myself. So I'd just take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and throw it in a blender and hope that I sound like myself.
Right. Well, after the Trip Daddies play their final show, what's next for Craig Straubinger?
Final Trip Daddy show. I'm already rehearsing with some old friends on the drums. It's a guy named Rob Lee, and on upright bass, Michael Graham, who was a Trip Daddy. For those of you who are unaware of the Trip Daddies, I think we're 27 years in. I don't know, 12 drummers, I think, and 5 or 6 bass players and me over those years. Yeah, that was another thing I, sort of thought about during the pandemic. I've always wanted to do something with Mike and Rob, and it seemed like a good time to sort of rebrand, put on a new hat, new identity, but it's still big guitar music. We're still playing American music, roots music, little more blues, but there's still the rock and roll element, early rock and roll influence. It's a trio. It's just the next thing. And again, it's called the Blue Sparks. I hope you look us up. We'll wind up on a stage or your favorite neighborhood dive, I hope.
Craig Straubinger was the first person I asked to be a guest on Frets. I didn't request it, but I was pleasantly surprised that he was gracious enough to bring along one of his gorgeous Gretsch guitars. I'd seen him play on stage over the years, but it was a special treat to hear him play that Gretsch and even demonstrate some fine fretwork on my Jazzmaster.
I can get carried away.
Jeff Beck. Well, Craig, I really appreciate you doing this. It's been great. You and I sort of knew each other, I think, over the years. Or
Right.
At least I knew you.
I know that guy, and he's always nice. I know that guy. He's nice.
I'd see you at shows, and we'd talk here and there. And I do watch your videos on social media. And
Uh-oh.
But no, this has been great. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I met a pretty gal, about as pretty as can be. Thought she was my baby till she introduced to me. Well, a great big old fella, about 6'4". I shivered and I shook. I couldn't do anymore, 'cause I'm a lover, not a fighter. Well, I'm a lover, not a fighter. I'm a lover, not a fighter, and I'm really built for speed. Built for speed. Built for speed. Well, if you think a jet is faster, you won't see me run. I can travel faster than a bullet from a gun, 'cause I'm a lover, not a fighter. I'm a lover, not a fighter.
Thanks for tuning in to Frets with DJ Fey. If you like the show, you can subscribe for free at most podcast platforms. Hope you'll join me again next time. Stay tuned.